empowered people make informed decisions that lead to living a life without regret. This is Sara Khaki and Shawna Woods from Atlanta Divorce Law Group, and this is the Happily Ever After Divorce Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Happily Ever After Divorce Podcast. This is Sara Khaki with Atlanta Divorce Law Group, joined by our very own managing partner, Shawna Woods. Is this the fork in the road? That's our title for today, and I think it's such a philosophical title that makes me so excited, and it makes me think of the famous Robert Frost poem. But it's almost like a cliche. It is so often that people say, I'm in that fork in the road, and they build up so much anxiety into a decision. They get so nervous about making the wrong decision because they're convinced they're in that proverbial fork in the road. If they take, are they taking the path less traveled, or are they going to take the other, make a right, and that's going to change your entire life? Shawna, you've actually lived through plenty of forks in the road, and I love your concept of when I'm actually in a fork in the road versus I'm already on the path. Don't be mistaken. And we had a little bit of side conversation about this before we went live. We typically don't do that. But I want to also comment with this. You're very good about knowing when somebody's facing a fork in the road versus when somebody's already on a path and the decision, they're just living the decision now. And you apply that quite a bit in the strategy building for our clients and for their cases. And you apply that a lot in the mentorship of our attorneys when they're working a case. So in the brilliant mind of Shawna's strategy and Shawna's 9 lives that she has lived, how does one know they're actually in that fork in the road that could change everything depending on they made a right or they made a left?
That is such a great question. I think that when I think about a true fork in the road, it is not necessarily just a hard decisions, right? We make hard decisions every day. We know we have to make them. We know what the right choice is. We may not want to make a right choice, but we know what it is. And even though it's a hard choice, we know what path that we go on. So many people come to us and there is no fork in the road for them. Or if there had been, it's way past. But they are on the path. They understand. They've done all of the soul searching. They've done all the work. They're here. Their mind is made up. This is where I'm going forward. But when we talk about forks in the road, we're not always just talking about marriage and divorce.
Right.
We're talking about decisions that could truly change your life. And which way do they go? And yes, I do think it's very important to have these decisions and these discussions in a bigger picture, right? Talking about where your goals are. Well, I know where my goal is. It is straight down this road. True forks in the road are where you're sitting there and you say, I can see myself going either way, and I truly don't know which way to go. I think, Sara, you're really good at when people come to us in that space and that mindset about helping them give their marriage another try.
Yes.
And making sure that they give enough credence and work towards, did I give this my all? I think people also have a misconception that having a fork in the road means you need to make the decision immediately. We are on a life path. We are not on a highway. We're not speeding down 400 at 80 miles an hour, right? We're sitting here when you have a true fork in the road. You need to take your time with it. And you really need to envision, if I go to the left, how is that going to look? And how is it going to affect all those I take with me?
Right.
Because I'm not just walking this life alone.
Right.
If I go to the right, same kind of concept in visualization. And coming to the realization that you may never look back and say, I made the right decision. You may never look back and say, I made the wrong decision. You just may look back and say, I really don't know if that was the right or wrong decision, but I like my life. So I'm happy with it.
I 100% agree. I think that so much of decision making isn't putting weight on right or wrong, but putting weight on, I used correct decision making process to get there. I used this critical path that I needed to use to get to my decision. And one thing you also said that just popped out at me is the speed of it, which we want to get out of that fork in the road. And it's almost because there is some tension, there's some pain being in that fork in the road. There is a loss of identity, loss of what box am I in. Let me quickly pick a path so I can get out of, relieve the tension, instead of sitting there and letting yourself really visualize what could be at either end, right? And you actually decide what could be at the either end. That's the brilliant part about life.
Yes.
Right? Is the power of choice. You can actually decide what will be at the either end. And I think taken me a long time and many different transitions in life to realize that if you use a critical decision-making path for yourself, that you decide any decision that comes across my table, here's the things I'm going to evaluate it against. These are the people in my life that I want to see how the decision's going to impact. These are the resources I'm willing to use. These are resources I'm not willing to use. These are my boundaries that I will not cross. These are my values that it needs to lie within. And this is my vision for the future that this needs to work along with. And I think when you're using that sort of like critical decision-making process, the right or wrong weight of it goes away. And then you will make it the best decision one way or another, and you will choose how it's going to end up, right? I mean, you come from a very different background from where you are today. I come from a very different background from where I'm sitting today. But all along the way, we kept making choices that brought us exactly here and led to the vision we had for our future from a much younger age, because we kept making the choice of this path will end up leading me to the future I want.
Absolutely. And you can make these decisions early on, like we've had to, and you continue to make these decisions all the way through life. And again, there's decisions that are hard, but they have to be made. But knowing your background and knowing your story, your parents made a huge fork in the road, huge, changed their trajectory, changed your trajectory. And I think that's really the crux of the question when you do reach that fork in the road. And I'm talking about those ones where you're just sitting there going, I'm asking for help from all of the spirituality that I believe in. I'm not necessarily seeking outside voices, but I'm really seeking deep into that inside voice and saying, how do I want my life to look when I'm standing at the end of the road?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means giving up on other things that you thought you would have in your life, that you thought you could accomplish and stand there and say, this is what I wanted in my life. And sometimes you have to let those go. And those are hard, horrible decisions to try to make. But to Sarah's point, that's why we sit at the fork for a long time until we are sure which path to take.
What you said is, God, I wish I could remember the name of this book. It may come to me before end of this recording. If it does, I'll mention it. There's a brilliant book that talks about how the future is what should determine the present. And I think the fork in the road happens and it freezes us and it gets us stuck when we don't have a vision. We've lost our vision for the future. Because as long as you have a vision for the future and you nurture it to the point you start crystallizing it, it keeps telling you, here's your path. That's not even a fork. The path is this, right? This is what's going to lead you there. And it keeps determining for you your present, because it's going to take you to where you want to end up. And the fork in the road may truly be when you don't know what your vision for the future is. So going back to, for instance, my dad's fork in the road, was it when he decided to leave Iran and take refuge in Sweden? Maybe it wasn't, based on what we're saying,
Right.
based on what you
Maybe that was so clear to him.
Yes, based on what you were even saying earlier about like, what are you already on the path? Like it really opened my mind to say, maybe at some point when my dad went and fought for the revolution, when he decided that he wanted a free government in Iran during the time of the Shah, and he was a young student and he was fighting for freedom, and he was fighting for freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and he wanted a democracy in Iran. Maybe that's when already that he had made his decision that, and the country didn't turn out to be what he wanted it to be, but he's already on the path of, I want to live and raise a family in a free country. So if the change of regime isn't going to bring that, fine. And so maybe he wasn't even a fork in the road. He's already on the path.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying when you have to realize, is this a true fork? Because you can see yourself going down either path. When I left the Witnesses, that wasn't a fork for me. I was very clear this was not for me anymore. I did not want to live that lifestyle. I didn't want to believe what they believe. So my path, although that was a horribly hard decision, was very clear. I knew which way to go. When you're at that true fork in the road, you envision yourself in two very different places. And you have to sit there and say, I have to make this decision. I cannot have both.
Yes. And a sacrifice may need to be made.
And a sacrifice has to be made. And I do want to encourage people, if they've had those kind of decisions, don't look back.
Yes.
You've made your choice. You've walked down the road. That fork is now gone. You may have divergent paths in the future that can lead you to other fulfillment, but looking back on that one decision is probably just going to bring you sorrow and hopefully not regret, but it's definitely going to bring you back to a time where you're caught in this indecision and you're so afraid to make that decision. You're so afraid to make those moves that you may stay stuck for a while. And the last thing you want to do is just sit there and not go, but take enough time to really give it the reflection, right, that it needs. My fork in the road was deciding not to marry my daughter's father. And it was a hard decision, the hardest decision I've ever had to make in my life. We were very young, and unfortunately, he was struggling with things that I was ill-equipped to deal with. That does not mean I didn't love him, all of what an 18-year-old can love. And it doesn't mean that I didn't see a future there with an intact family if we could have gotten him over his struggles. It was a decision I had to make for me and my daughter. And choosing that path to when I did, that was my decision. Unfortunately, he let it be known if I chose the other path, that I was not going to be with him, then he was not going to be involved in my daughter's life. So it was the hardest decision I've ever had to make. And one of the most rewarding things is really feeling like I made the right one. And one of the most dangerous things is wondering if I had made the other.
But you've had a series of choices that have happened or after that may have not been forks in the road, that has put you in a position where you've continued to make that the right fork in the road for you, right? I mean, there's so many series. Yes, you put yourself on that path, and then every choice you made from there was so crystal clear of, I am setting my daughter up for the best life possible. And then every choice was just led one after another from there. And I think that's what we mean when we say, once you've made that critical decision-making process and it's led you to make a right or a left, from there, you just keep making choices to reinforce that future with that path.
Absolutely. Now that you've chosen your path, now that you know where it is, and now that you know how clear it is, do everything that you can to make sure that you're succeeding along that path open yourself up. When we say open yourself up for possibilities, what do we really mean? Prepare yourself for the possibilities. Make sure that when those possibilities present yourself, you're ready.
That's great. Thank you, Shawna.
Thanks for listening to the Happily Ever After Divorce podcast. If you'd like to learn more, go to atlantadivorcelawgroup.com/resources.